There was discussion of terrorism. Terrorism would be used widely in Europe and other parts of the world. Terrorism at that time was felt would not be necessary in the United States. It possibly could become necessary if the United States did not move rapidly enough into accepting the system. But at least in the foreseeable future, it was not planned and very benignly on their part. Maybe terrorism would not be required here, but the implication being that it would be indeed used if it was necessary. Along with this came a little bit of a scolding that Americans have had it too good anyway, and just a little bit of terrorism would help convince Americans that the world indeed is a dangerous place, or can be if we don't relinquish control to the proper authorities. There was discussion of money and banking. One statement was inflation is infinite. You can put an infinite number of zeros after any number and put the decimal points wherever you want. This is an indication that inflation is a tool of controllers. Money would become predominantly credit. It was already money is primarily a credit thing, but exchange of money would be not cash or palpable things, but electronic credit signals. People would carry money only in very small amounts for things like chewing gum and candy bars, just pocket sorts of things. Any purchase of any significant amount would be done electronically. Earnings would be electronically entered into your account. There would be a single banking system. It may have the appearance of being more than one, but ultimately, basically, it would be one single banking system. So that when you got paid, your pay would be entered for you into your account balance, and then when you purchased anything at the point of purchase, it would be deducted from your account balance, and you would actually carry nothing with you. Also, computer records can be kept of whatever it was you purchased, so that if you were purchasing too much of any particular item, some official wanted to know what you were doing with your money, they could go back and review your purchases and determine what it was you were buying. There was a statement to the effect that any purchase of significant size, like an automobile, a bicycle, a refrigerator, a radio or television or whatever, might be have some sort of identification on it where it could be traced, so that very quickly anything which was either given away or stolen, whatever, authorities would be able to establish who purchased it and when. Computers would allow this to happen. The ability to save would be greatly curtailed. People would just not be able to save any considerable degree of wealth. There was some statement of recognition that wealth represents power, and wealth in the hands of a lot of people is not good for the people in charge, so that if you save too much, you might be taxed. The more you save, the higher the rate of tax on your savings, so your savings really could never get very far. And also, if you began to show a pattern of saving too much, you might have your pay cut. People would say, well, you're saving instead of spending. You really don't need all that money. But basically the idea being to prevent people from accumulating any wealth which might have long-range disruptive influence on the system. People would be encouraged to use credit to borrow, and then also be encouraged to renege on their debts, so that they would destroy their own credit. And the idea here is that again, if you're too stupid to handle credit wisely, this gives the authorities the chance to come down hard on you once you've overshot your credit. electronic payments initially would all be based on different kinds of credit cards. These were already in use in 1969 to some extent, not as much as now. But people would have credit cards with the electronic strip on it. And once they got used to that, then it would be pointed out the advantage of having all of this combined into a single credit card serving a single monetary system, and then you don't have to carry around all that plastic. So the next step would be the single card, and then the next step would be to replace the single card with a skin implant. The single card could be lost or stolen, give rise to problems, could be exchanged with somebody else to confuse identity. The skin implant, on the other hand, would be not losable or counterfeitable or transferable to another person. So you and your accounts would be identified without any possibility of error. And the skin implant, of course, would have to be put somewhere that was convenient to the scanner, for example, your right hand or your forehead. At that time when I heard this, I was unfamiliar with the statements in the book of Revelation. The speaker went on to say, now some of you people who read the Bible will attach significance to this, to the Bible, but he went on to disclaim any biblical significance at all. This is just common sense of how the system could work and should work, and there's no need to read any superstitious biblical principles into it. As I say, at the time I was not very familiar with the words of Revelation. Shortly after that I became familiar with them, and the significance of what he said really was striking. I'll never forget it. There was some mention also of implants that would lend themselves to surveillance by providing radio signals. This could be under the skin, or a dental implant put in like a filling, so that either fugitives or possibly every citizen could be identified by a certain frequency from his personal transmitter and could be located at any time or in any place by any authority who wanted to find him. This would be particularly useful if somebody broke out of prison. There was more discussion of personal surveillance. One thing was said, you'll be watching television and somebody will be watching you at the same time at a central monitoring station. Television sets would have a device to enable this. The TV set would not have to be on in order for this to be operative. Also, the television set can be used to monitor what you are watching. People can tell what you're watching on the TV and how you're reacting to what you're watching. And you would not know that you were being watched while you were watching your television. How would we get people to accept these things into their homes? Well, people would buy them when they buy their own television. They won't know that they're on there at first. This was described as being by what we now know as cable TV to replace antenna TV. When you buy a TV set, this monitor would just be a part of the set, and most people would not have enough knowledge of electronics to know it's there in the beginning. And then the cable would be the means of carrying the surveillance message to the monitor. By the time people found out that this monitoring was going on, they would also be already very dependent upon television for a number of things. Just the way people are dependent on the telephone today. One thing the television would be used for would be purchases. You wouldn't have to leave your home to purchase. You just turn on your TV, and there would be a way of interacting with the television channel to the store that you wanted to purchase, and you could flip the switch from place to place to choose a refrigerator or clothing. This would be both convenient, but it also would make you dependent on the television, so that the built-in monitor is something you could not do without. There was some discussion of audio monitors too, just in case the authorities wanted to hear what was going on in rooms other than where the television monitor was. And in regard to this, the statement was made, any wire going into your house, for example, your telephone wire, could be used this way. I remember this in particular because it was fairly near the end of the presentation, and as we were leaving the meeting place, I said something to one of my colleagues about going home and pulling all the wires out of the house, except that I knew I couldn't get by without the telephone. And the colleague I spoke to just seemed numb. To this day, I don't think he even remembers what we talked about or what we heard that time, because I've asked him. But at that time, he seemed stunned. Before all these changes would take place with electronic monitoring, it was mentioned that there would be service trucks all over the place working on the wires and putting in new cables. This is how people who were on the inside would know how things were progressing. Privately owned housing would become a thing of the past. Cost of housing and financing housing would gradually be made so high that most people couldn't afford it. People who already owned their houses would be allowed to keep them, but as years go by, it would be more and more difficult for young people to buy a house. Young people would more and more become renters, particularly in apartments or condominiums. More and more unsold houses would stand vacant. People just couldn't buy them. But the cost of housing would not come down. You'd right away think, well, the vacant house, the price will come down, people will buy it. But there was some statement that to the effect that the price would be held high, even though there was many of them available, so that free marketplaces would not operate. People would not be able to buy these, and gradually more and more of the population would be forced into small apartments which would not accommodate very many children. Then as the number of real homeowners diminished, they would become a minority. There would be no sympathy for them from the majority who dwelled in apartments, and then these homes could be taken by increased taxes or other regulations that would be detrimental to home ownership and would be acceptable to the majority. Ultimately, people would be assigned where they would live, and it would be common to have non-family members living with you. This by way of your not knowing just how far you could trust anybody. This would all be under the control of a central housing authority. Have this in mind in 1990 when the census comes out and they ask how many bedrooms in your house, how many bathrooms in your house, do you have a finished game room? This information really is personal and of no national interest to government under our existing Constitution, but you'll be asked those questions and decide how you want to respond to them. When the new system takes over, people will be expected to sign allegiance to it, indicating they don't have any reservations or holding back to the old system. There just won't be any room, he said, for people who won't go along. We can't have such people cluttering up the place, so such people would be taken to special places. And here I don't remember the exact words, but the inference I drew was that at these special places where they were taken, then they would not live very long. He may have said something like disposed of humanely, but I don't remember very precisely, just the impression that the system was not going to support them when they would not go along with the system. That would leave death as the only alternative. Somewhere in this vein, he said there would not be any martyrs. When I first heard that, I thought he meant that people would not be killed, but as the presentation developed, what he meant was they would not be killed in such a way or disposed of in such a way that they could serve as inspiration to other people the way martyrs do. Rather, he said something like this, people will just disappear. Just a few additional items sort of thrown in here at the end, which I failed to include where they belong more appropriately. One, the bringing in of the new system, he said, probably would occur on a weekend in the winter. Everything would shut down on Friday evening, and Monday morning when everybody awakened, there would be an announcement made that the new system was in place. During the process of getting the United States ready for these changes, he commented everybody would be busier with less leisure time and less opportunity for people to really look about and see what was going on around them. Also, there would be more changes, more difficult to keep up as far as one's investments. Investment instruments would be changing, policies, interest rates changing, so that it would be a difficult job just to keep up with what you had already earned. Interesting about automobiles, it would look as though there were many, many varieties of automobiles, but when you looked very closely, there would be great duplication. It would be made to look different with chrome and wheel covers and this sort of thing, but looking closely, one would see that the same automobile was made by more than one manufacturer. This recently was brought home to me when I was in a parking lot and saw a small Ford, I forget the model, and a small Japanese automobile, which were identical, except for little things like the number of holes in the wheel cover and the chrome around the plate and the shape of the grille. But if you looked at the basic parts of the automobiles, they were identical. They just happened to be parked side by side where I was struck with this, and I was again reminded of what had been said many years ago. I'm hurrying here because I'm near the end of the tape, and let me just summarize by saying to hear all of these things said by one individual at one time in one place relating to so many different human endeavors, and then to look and see how many of these actually came about, that is, changes accomplished between then and now, and the things which are planned for the future. I think there's no denying that this is controlled, and there is indeed a conspiracy. The question then becomes what to do, and I think first off we must put our faith in God and pray and ask for His guidance. And secondly, I think do what we can to inform other individuals as much as possible, as much as they may be interested. Some people just don't care because they're preoccupied with getting along in their own personal endeavors. But as much as possible, I think we should try to inform other people who may be interested, and again, put our faith and trust in God and pray constantly for His guidance and for the courage to accept what we may be facing in the near future, rather than accept peace and justice, which we hear so much now. It's a cliche. Let's insist on liberty and justice for all.